Hey everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Recording this here on Monday. It's about 5:15. Dan Labbe with Mary Kay Cabot, our Hey Mary Kay edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Mary Kay, we're going to get to it. There were questions, obviously, about the quarterbacks. There were questions about this left tackle trade. But let's just dive into the topic of the day, and that is, of course, this potential quarterback change that could be looming. We talked about it on the post-game show. Maybe it's time. It's sort of been trending this way. And then today, when Kevin Stefanski had multiple opportunities to basically say, yes, Joe Flacco's the starter, he declined to go that far. He just kind of said the old Kevin line of, it's about more than one person. They need to fix a lot of different things. But he never said that Joe Flacco is going to be a starting quarterback or he's not going to make a change. And that is significant. We know with Kevin, who never says anything, that when he approaches talking about the quarterback like this, it at least means a change is on the table. And in the hallways and offices in Berea, they're at least discussing it here before they get started on this week Wednesday.
Right. And that is what we talked about yesterday on our pod and video. We were very clear about the fact that we felt at least a discussion was warranted. So they've got to be talking about it. And I really get the gut feeling that they are making the switch to Dillon. Either that is happening or they are conducting some pretty good gamesmanship for the Vikings to throw them off on who is starting at quarterback on Sunday against them. It could be either of those two things, but I choose to believe that they are making a switch to Dillon because I just think that they cannot handle any more of these turnovers, any more of these drops, and any more of this lack of scoring. They are averaging only 14 points per game. And it took them a lot to get to that 14 points. It took 2 defensive interceptions by the Browns. It took a blocked field goal by Shelby Harris. And that was a blocked field goal or a blocked punt. That
blocked
was
field
not
goal.
Blocked field goal.
It's been a long 4 weeks.
There's been so many blocked this, blocked that lately. So it took those things to get them to that 14 points. And the 14 points is 31st in the NFL, only ahead of the 0-4 Titans, who are averaging 12.8 points per game. So I said this to you off air, that I don't think things could get any worse with Dillon, to which you replied, oh, yes, they can. And they can, of course. They can get worse. But I don't think they will. I actually think that Dillon can go out there and handle himself pretty well and manage the game. And they've got Quinshawn to run the ball. And if they can just play some clean football, I think they'd be okay.
Yeah, I don't know how much changing quarterbacks is a fix-all. Like we've talked about this, it's not like guys are just running wide open and Joe's missing them or whatever, but also like the ball isn't coming out quickly and the offense isn't explosive. We're not seeing the ball get pushed downfield as much as you'd like with Joe Flacco. And on top of everything else, he is turning the football over. So it almost seems like maybe they're looking at this as they can put Dillon Gabriel in there and he can kind of run this offense the way Kevin Stefanski wants to see it run, which is, I think Kevin in his heart of hearts is one of those coaches who's like, this is the play. This is where I want the football to go. Now there's obviously some room for the quarterback to do different things in there and whatever else. But Dillon seems to fit a little more snugly into that idea than Joe Flacco, who, again, I did have a chance to rewatch that game today, and the ball just isn't coming out. It's just not. And that's not all Joe Flacco's fault. I think that is important to note. I don't think this is all Joe Flacco's fault, but I don't know that, all jokes aside, I don't know that changing to Dillon Gabriel is going to make it worse. I suppose it could, but it's got at least a small chance to make it better. And if you want to give your team a fighting chance and keep these guys believing here early in the season, you might have to do it for that reason alone.
Yeah, I think so. I wrote a column about this today, and I tried to think of as many reasons as I could about why this could be the spark that this offense needs. And when you just talk about schematically, I think that Dillon Gabriel runs the kinds of things that the Browns wanted to run this season. Again, with the RPOs and the keepers and some design runs and different things like that. He's mobile. He can zip around out there. That's why the ball isn't coming out quickly. He's under siege Joe is under siege and he really can't move. He can't get away from the trouble. He can to a certain extent, but not the way someone like Dillon Gabriel will be able to. I think you'll see a quicker game. I think you'll see Dillon getting the ball into the hands of more receivers, maybe on shorter plays, more of a quick game a little bit, and let them do their thing after the catch. That's sort of how I envision this a little bit. Again, some RPOs and some different things. And they were working with Kenny Pickett and Dillon Gabriel on a lot of those things, a lot of that installation in training camp. And I think that's how this was supposed to go. Kenny Pickett was supposed to start the season, and then Dillon Gabriel, once he was ready, would take over at some point if Kenny was faltering. That's how this was supposed to go. And Kenny's hamstring injury threw a monkey wrench into the plans. If we all remember, Joe Flacco was a later add-in. Now, I'm sure they had him in the back of their mind that they would add him as that veteran presence, but he was signed fairly late in the free agency process, and even he didn't know that he was coming here. So if you don't know that you're signing with the Cleveland Browns, and it is, I think, April or whatever it was, then there's a good chance you are not penciled in as the starter. Kenny was penciled in as the starter, and they even said that, basically. We talked to Kevin and Andrew about that at the owners' meetings, and they really believed that Kenny could come in here and be that sort of game manager that they were looking for. When those plans changed, they had to go to Joe, and now I think it's time for them to want to get back to seeing if they can run that kind of offense. Tommy Rees, the new offensive coordinator, brings some college concepts up with him. Dillon Gabriel has started 64 college games. He's done all different kinds of concepts. Once again, whatever, spread, RPO, you name it. He's played pro style, West Coast. He's played all different kinds of offenses, and he's changed it up so many different ways with the 3 different colleges that he played for and the different offensive coordinators that he played for. So I think that he can probably go out there, and I don't think the moment would be too big for him. What we don't know yet is what are these defensive coordinators going to find out about him that he doesn't know about himself yet, right? I mean, these guys find weaknesses that you don't know you have, and they will attack those weaknesses. They will, of course, be trying to bat down balls because he's only 5'11". They'll be doing all kinds of things. But when you start 64 college games at a very high level, and his last year was at Oregon, you've played some really, really darn good football. And I think that he is maybe more ready than even some quarterbacks that might be starting this season. I mean, Cam Ward, who's 0-4 and standing up in press conferences and spewing expletives, I think he started 38 games. So there's a big difference between 64 starts and 38 starts. There's just a difference. And so I think that Dillon Gabriel has a body of knowledge that will serve him well. I think he's going to have a poise that will serve him well. And I think he has a skill set that is pretty darn good. It's an above average arm, not as strong as a Baker Mayfield, but a pretty darn good arm and pretty darn good mobility. And then his superpower, as we've talked about many, many times, is his processing speed. He's got a computer-like brain, and I think that they're really excited to see what he can do with that.
So I want to go back, and we did get a question about Kenny Pickett from Rick I'm butchering his name here. Rick LaPaglia in Clifton Springs, New York. He says, "Hey, Mary Kay, I know everyone on the planet is lobbying for a change at QB. Having 2 rookies behind Joe is not ideal. At this point, do you feel there's any regret for trading Kenny Pickett? He was slightly in the lead during training camp until his hammy." And we talked about that a little on the post-game show last night. And I just keep going back to this idea of if the plan was to start Kenny Pickett, which I agree with, right? That's what they were telegraphing all along. If the plan was to start Kenny Pickett and have Dillon Gabriel be his backup, I guess I just don't understand why that couldn't have still happened just because he hurt his hamstring. Like, unless that hamstring was going to keep him out of football games in September, I don't understand why they had to be so beholden to this 4-man quarterback competition. I mean, they almost didn't have to bring in Joe. I guess in most normal situations, you're bringing in your veteran and you're bringing in your rookie, and then you're bringing in another arm that maybe isn't a real threat, but he's a veteran guy. Maybe you can trust him just as an insurance policy. And it feels like the Browns kind of had a plan, but then they set up this quarterback room to completely disrupt that plan. And now here we are, like Joe Flacco, we're 4 games into this and he might already head to the bench. For such a process driven organization, it just feels like there was no real process here.
Well, I actually do think there was a process, and I do think that the hamstring was enough to derail the plan, because I don't think that Kenny Pickett was going to necessarily be ready to start the season. And if he was going to be ready to start the season, he had no time on task with the offense in training camp. Starting from July 26th, when he suffered the hamstring on day 4 of camp, he didn't practice basically the rest of camp in any 11 on 11 drills. And that's no way to head into a season. They needed to bring him along throughout training camp so that he was ready to go. At that point, it became obvious that Joe Flacco was going to be more prepared and ready. And once you get to that point, Dillon Gabriel had shown them enough that when they were done with Joe, they weren't going to be turning it over to Kenny Pickett. They were going to be turning it over to Dillon. Now, I think that they wanted this to be a longer on-ramp for Dillon Gabriel. I don't think they wanted it to happen in week 5 of the season. I think they wanted it probably to be more in the second half of the season, and that they could run the ball and play good defense and hope that Joe could make some of that magic. Well, here they are, 8 turnovers in 4 games, and nothing went as well as they hoped it would go with Joe. And you look at some of your best skill players, and they are not thriving. I mean, they are not thriving at all. There's no connection between Joe Flacco and Jerry Jeudy. They did connect on those scripted plays in the beginning of the game. They connected 3 times on that opening TD drive, and that was good. But Jerry went 0 for 6 thereafter. Because Joe is under siege so much, it's hard for him to necessarily get the ball out on time to get Jerry in a situation where they can catch somebody off guard, or they can get the ball there in the precise amount of time that it takes for Jerry to be the only one that's going to be able to catch it, and it's going to get exactly where it needs to go. Sometimes Joe doesn't even know where the ball is going because he's flat on his back. And on the one pass that Jerry dropped at the end of the game, when he was near the 40 of Detroit, and it could have been a game-tying touchdown potentially, Aiden Hutchinson kind of got a piece of that ball, and it didn't get there the way that Joe wanted it to. And so there have been issues that way. And when that's not happening, then these guys are dropping some passes. Jerry's tied for second in the NFL with 4 drop passes. Some of that is because the throws aren't as precise as they need to be. Once again, some of that is because they're playing with 2 backup tackles right now. They're playing with 2 backup tackles, and when you got Aiden Hutchinson beating Cornelius Lucas on some plays, it's hard to stand in there and throw the ball on time where you want it to go. So there have been a number of issues, but that also brings me to the fact that maybe, just maybe, Dillon Gabriel can slip and slide away from trouble a little bit. Maybe he can step up in the pocket, or step to his side, or take off running a little bit. These are some things that really haven't been happening. And I don't know, maybe his processing speed at this point might even be a little bit quicker than I don't know the answer to that. We will have to see how that all works out. But I think that there is some thought to the fact that Dillon might be able to not only function pretty well himself, but elevate the play of the guys around him, because they are languishing right now. They're absolutely languishing. There's nobody on this offense that's really flourishing in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and again, too, I think some of this is it just goes back to questions I have about decisions that they made in the offseason, right? Like, they're playing with 2 backup tackles right now, but they were also relying very heavily on 2 tackles that get hurt a lot. And also their starting left tackle is a guy they didn't even know if he could be their starting left tackle long-term, in DeJuan Jones. Now, you can't predict a guy falling into somebody's leg and ending his season, but it's also the 3rd straight year that they're going to have to finish the year without DeJuan. At receiver, they handed that wide receiver 2 job to Ced Tillman, and now he's going to miss some time now with a hamstring, and he's been a little bit up and down. So now you're relying on Jamari Thrash and Isaiah Bond. So there are certainly underlying issues, and you can't blame the organization for everything bad that's happened, but there are some decisions where it's kind of like, you can't just throw up your hands and say, well, we got 2 backup tackles in there. you kind of set yourself up where you might be a little thin at tackle to begin with, right? So they've gotten some bad luck, but then they also had some choices that compounded that bad luck. For example, signing a 40-year-old quarterback who frankly wasn't that good in Indianapolis last year, and kind of hoping you could recreate that 2023 magic. It's a decision that just didn't work out. So I think some of it's bad luck, and I think some of it is just, I don't know if you want to call it poor planning or team building, something like that. But they've made some choices that have, all the things that could have gone wrong to have those choices backfire have gone wrong.
Right. And I think that they made a big, firm commitment to the defense this year,
Right.
in terms of the middle of that defense, with Mason Graham, taking him at number 5 overall, and then turning around and grabbing Carson Schlesinger. And obviously they added Quinshawn and they added Dillon to the running game. But the tackles may have gotten the offensive tackles may have gotten a little bit of short shrift. I think they know that by next year they have to make some significant changes to their offensive line. Joe Bitonio is probably going to retire after this year, or at least we think he might. And Jack Conklin, you have to figure out if you think he can stay healthy. And they did make a trade today for a tackle, and we can talk about that a little bit more when we read that question. But it seems like they felt like, okay, we can get by with what we have. And in a perfect world, DeJuan Jones nails down the left tackle job, and we don't have to worry about that side anymore. So I think that was part of it. And it just didn't work out. I don't think they foresaw that Jack Conklin was going to miss 3 games with this elbow injury, and who knows how many more he might miss. I don't know if he'll be back this week yet or not. And I think they felt like they were in pretty good shape with Cornelius Lucas, a 12th year pro, as their backup swing tackle. And it just hasn't worked out the way that they hoped it would. And then you couple that with an immobile 40-year-old quarterback, and it's been a recipe for disaster.
So let's talk about Cam Robinson, because obviously that was something you foreshadowed on our post-game podcast and your insider column on Sunday as well, that there could be a trade coming for a tackle. So this was an interesting trade. Cam Robinson is a guy that started in Jackson, got extended actually at one point in Jacksonville, and since then he's kind of bounced around. But the reality is, when you're in the position the Browns are in, you got to take a shot like this. It didn't cost anything. And this is a guy that has started a ton of games. So they just need bodies at that position. So they grabbed Thayer Munford, who has at least started some games in the NFL last week off New England's practice squad. They bring in Cam Robinson, who, whether it's this week or against Pittsburgh, he's probably going to be in that starting lineup pretty quickly. So, they're taking shots there. They're trying to find some bodies to put there. And if you're going to be going to a rookie, it seems like that's a pretty smart move, to try to do anything you can to at least stopgap this tackle position until you can, hopefully fix it permanently, whether it's a free agency, the draft, both, however you attack it in the offseason.
Yeah, so hopefully for them, Jack Conklin will be back in a timely fashion. And then if they have Jack and now they have Cam, then I think they'll feel pretty good about their tackle situation at that point. And then you can go to Cornelius Lucas and KT Leviston when you have to, and then find some other creative ways to use a KT in some kind of jumbo formation or something like that. He's a very good run blocker. But this gives them an opportunity to settle down those positions, providing Jack comes back. And he is primarily a left tackle. And as you mentioned, he has started 102 games. That's a lot of football games. I don't know exactly what happened. I still have to investigate what happened with him in Houston this year, because he only started 1 game at left tackle against the Rams, and out of the first 3, and he graded out pretty well. He, according to Pro Football Focus, he graded out at about 66 plus, which is pretty good for a left tackle. So, I mean, it's not ideal. You want the 70s, but 66 is not bad. And then he was inactive this past game, which I think is because they knew they were trading him. So if he can come in and settle things down a little bit, that will help out a lot. And they might have to use some kind of a combo, because if you want Quinshawn Judkins to be able to run the ball, maybe you somehow do use KT Leviston a little bit more in some ways, and you get creative with that a little bit. But this should really help them, because right now they're into their depth, and you don't want to be into your depth when you're going up against Aiden Hutchinson. They took full advantage of that, and the Browns didn't have any answer for it. And they should have. I mean, they probably should have chipped him a little bit more. I'd have to watch the film. You watched it. Did it look to you like they gave Cornelius Lucas very much help on Aiden Hutchinson?
So I didn't watch, like, I didn't like hone in on Aiden Hutchinson every single snap, but there were times when he was one-on-one. And there were times when he would have chipping help, or they'd run a little, like Njoku would block him and then screen, run a little screen. So they did help a little bit, but it wasn't like, it's not like when you watch Myles Garrett and you'll see like three guys, what was the screenshot going around from the Green Bay game? There were just three guys lined up in front of Myles, or, a tight end follows him from one end to the other. I didn't notice a lot of extremes like that. So there were definitely times when he was one-on-one. I can say that. And there were times when they would have a little chipping help from a tight end or whatever. But again, it didn't look like it's funny because, they do sit up there and talk about how teams chip and block and double, triple team Myles Garrett. And it's true. I almost wonder why they don't take a page out of that book sometimes. Like, you're watching it, you're complaining about it. Why not do it to somebody else? But I didn't see a bunch of examples where they did anything necessarily extreme to slow down Aiden. I get him confused with Aiden Hutchinson.
Right. And they probably should have, they probably should have done a little bit more, knowing that you have two backups and that he's going to be ready to pounce. So that didn't work out very well. That last strip sack led to their final touchdown. Not that the Browns were coming back at that point. Anyways, the game was over at 27-10. But I think it's a cautionary tale moving forward. That maybe you do have to give some of these guys the Myles treatment. And maybe they didn't think that Aiden Hutchinson was back to peak form yet, but he certainly found himself yesterday and developed some confidence and got his mojo back. And you don't want that to happen against you. So as they move forward and they face guys like this, they're going to have to give them a little more attention.
Yeah, it was it was a game wrecker yesterday. That's for sure. Okay, let's get to some questions here, some more questions from our Football Insider subscribers. And let's talk about a guy that had a good day yesterday. And maybe the Browns, this is a guy that's going to get more opportunities here with the Cedric Tillman injury. Howard Williamson from Sacramento, California says, "Hey, Mary Kay, when do you see Isaiah Bond moving up the wide receiver depth chart? It seems clear that Tillman has durability issues. And of course, as Kevin Stefanski said, Cedric Tillman won't be out there for a few weeks with this hamstring injury. Bond looked good yesterday. I think they're starting to kind of figure out how to use him. They did run that one little, whatever you want to call it, swing pass. It wasn't a screen, but they got him the ball quick. But they sent him down the field a couple times, and he made a couple plays for him. So I think they're starting to kind of figure out what they want to do with Isaiah Bond a little.
Yes, and remember, he has not been with the team that long. And so he's still finding his way and learning the offense. But he's really smart. I mean, you can tell that he's smart. He's picking things up very, very quickly. And each week they can give him a little bit more to do. And I think there is tremendous upside there. And certainly with Tillman out, he is going to be that's it. I mean, he is up that depth chart right now because Tillman is going to be out multiple weeks. So you can expect Isaiah to step up, I think, for the most part, into that role as sort of the number 2 receiver. I mean, you also have Jamari Thrash, who's going to be getting a lot more reps, and they might have to mix and match things a little bit more than they would have, or do some different personnel groupings and formations in a way that they weren't not intending to, because you don't have necessarily the exact body type that you do with said Tillman, the bigger body type of receiver that he is. But they've got guys that are ready to step up and do some things. And again, I think Isaiah is one of those players, and I think he's ready for more. And it's going to be really interesting to see what he can do. And it will be particularly interesting to see what some of these young guys can do if Dillon is in there. Because remember, when you're a backup, you're playing with backup. So sometimes you have developed a really nice chemistry on the second team with your fellow second teamers. Like if Shador Sanders went out there and he had Gage Larvidan and Caden Davis and Malachi Corley with him, then he's probably going to look pretty decent with those guys because he's repped it over and over and over with them. So Dillon has spent plenty of times throwing the ball to Jamari Thrash, and he's getting up to speed more and more with Isaiah Bond. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what he can do with some of those guys that he already has chemistry with.
One more thing here that has had some people bothered after yesterday, and that, of course, when we talk about the phases of the game, offense, defense, and special teams. Greg in Medina, Ohio. Hey, Mary Kay, what do the Browns do with their special teams coach? It's been awful this year. And, of course, going back to when the Browns hired him, everyone was so excited to bring in Bubba Ventrone. Special teams has been a challenge. Yesterday was no exception to that, of course. And just like with everyone in the organization, when you're 1-3, everyone's watching you very closely and trying to put you on the hot seat. So I guess what's next for Bubba Ventrone in this team?
Wow, just when you thought they had turned the corner on special teams and then they give up that punt return for a touchdown, it was very, very disappointing. And Grant Delpit took blame for that. And he said he thought the ball was out of bounds. He quit on the play. And, that's not how Bubba coaches it. So I don't know if you can 100% blame that on Bubba, except for it will be a teaching moment in the meeting room this week. There's no question about that. They have to have their heads on straight, even when you're down as many points as these guys were at that time. And really, they were only down 20-10 at that time. So, so that's not something where you can be losing your focus or your concentration. So Grant is owning that. And, they're going to have to get that kind of thing corrected. But it does seem to me like there are more big plays on special teams this year all around the league. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of stuff going on. And maybe it's just because so many of those things are happening right here with the Cleveland Browns. But it seems like there have been more blocks and more returns and things like that. Are you noticing that as well?
Yeah, well, even last week, right, when the Browns had that blocked field goal, which, by the way, Bubba Ventrone certainly should get some credit for.
Right.
The Eagles had didn't they have two blocks against the Rams, including the one that they returned for a touchdown to put that game away? Like, there are some funky things happening on special teams this year. And I don't know if it's a trend or if it's just one of those weird, like, NFL moments, and a few weeks things will feel normal again, but it does seem like there's just more weirdness on special teams right now.
Yeah, so we'll have to see what the trend is, but certainly if the Browns make a change at quarterback and they start to get some cleaner play, again, it's not going to be perfect. Dillon Gabriel will have growing pains. Once again, he's a rookie. They all have growing pains. He's 5'11". He might have some challenges with what they're going to try to do to him in that regard with hemming him in or batting down passes and things like that. But if they can get some cleaner offensive play, they certainly have got to do better on special teams. They've got to continue to push it and make sure that the kicking teams are an asset and not a liability to this football team.
One of the things that stood out, and look, the punt return is an extreme example, right? Like that's an extreme mistake. But I think we've talked a little bit about this team's margin for error and how they just don't have very much of it. If you look at yesterday's game, just between the Browns and the Lions specifically, it's not like the Lions were perfect in that football game by any stretch of the imagination. Jamison Williams dropped at least two passes, and I might be forgetting another one. They kept trying to get him down the field, so he had just some brutal drops in that game. There was that drive where they had the back-to-back false starts. They were putting together a little something, and they had back-to-back false starts. Yep. I mean, it was not a perfect or clean game by the Lions by any stretch of the imagination, but they just are able to overcome some of that stuff, and they're just able to make these mistakes and overcome those things. Now, the Browns had some moments where they made mistakes, and their defense is so good that they were able to hold the Lions to a field goal or make the Lions punt or something like that. But like, mistakes happen in football. You've got to be equipped to overcome them. And I think one of the problems right now is this offense just leaves so little room for, like, they just can't There was a series, I can't remember the exact series off the top of my head. I'd have to look at the game book, and I don't have it pulled up right now. But the Browns got out to about midfield, and then I think they got a holding penalty, and they kind of got backed up, and that was it. Like, they just had no chance at that point. And hopefully, if they do change quarterbacks, that'll be something that will put them in a position where if it's like 2nd and 15 or even 2nd and 20, it's not just throw your hands up and, get ready to play defense. They just aren't equipped to overcome these mistakes they're making. Whereas the Lions, they're one of the most talented teams in football, and they've got a group of guys that have been together for years. They're able to overcome a lot of those things.
Right. I 100% agree with you. But what the Browns did in the Green Bay game, even though they didn't have the offense humming along at all and they were shut out for 56 minutes, what they weren't doing in that game was making the egregious errors and the egregious turnovers in that game. They were not giving the game away. And in this particular game against the Detroit Lions, they gave it away. And I led my game story with a couple of quotes from guys that were saying, we beat ourselves. And I think to a certain extent, they kind of did. Because if you look at the points, the defense really, in its own right, held the Lions to only 10 points. And that's pretty darn good. The other 24 points, 17 came off of the turnovers and 7 came from the block punt. So even though things did not go well against Green Bay for the first 56 minutes of that football game, they weren't completely throwing the game away. And in 2 games, that's what they have done. In 2 of their losses, the blowout losses to the Ravens and to the Lions, they have thrown the game away with multiple giveaways. And that's what you can't do. Nobody's going to be able to overcome, it's very rare that you're going to be able to overcome 3 giveaways and a punt return for a touchdown. That would be really, really hard to do. So these are the kinds of things that have got to change. And that's where a decent or above average game manager will come in, if that's what Dillon can give them. I don't know if he can give them that, but that would be the goal, for him to come in and to just manage it well enough, distribute the ball well enough, get the ball into the hands of your best playmakers, and not be giving the game away and throwing the game away. One very good thing working in his favor and working in the Browns' favor is the fact that Quinshon Judkins is running the ball really well, and that is going to help them. He ran for 94 yards against the Packers' number 2 ranked defense, and then the Lions have a pretty darn good run defense themselves, and he ran for 82 yards. Now, it took a lot of carries to get him to 82 yards, 21 carries, so the average was not great. But still, he hung in there. They stuck with it, and he did a nice job. And he also caught for 33 yards. So he is becoming a force to be reckoned with, and he's only been around for 3 weeks or so. So he's going to continue to get better. So I don't think the sky is necessarily falling. If they make this change, they clean it up a little bit, Quinshon continues to run the ball the way that he's running the ball and gets better, and then the defense continues to play the way that it's been played.
Yeah, you mentioned that average with Quinshon, and I think when you watch him run, and I'd have to go back and look to see how many there were, but it almost feels like there's no negative plays. I'm sure there are plays where he loses yardage, but it just feels like he's always going to get a yard or 2 yards, and then so even when he's stopped, it's not going to be some super negative play. And he's really decisive. He kind of reminds me a little bit of Kareem Hunt like that. There's a little bit of Jahmyr Gibbs in there, kind of watching them both run the ball. You see the difference when he's carrying the football, and then we've seen some of those explosive runs too. So that's huge. That's absolutely huge that he's out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's just a very natural runner of the football. You see those times where it looks like there's nothing there, and he'll just make a quick little move, a little juke, and he finds the little hole or the seam, and he can get some more yards out of that. He just seems very, very natural. The moment is certainly not too big for him. I saw him standing up to a defender yesterday where, he just kind of got chest to chest with somebody. He's not going to back down from anybody. He's very tough. I think he's going to play and is playing Cleveland Browns football. And you always say that he reminds you of Kareem. I always say he reminds me a little bit of Nick. So I think he's a little bit of a combo of those two guys. But he's powerful. He gets stronger as the game goes along. and they're onto something with him. And I think it's really going to serve them well as they move forward.
Yeah, Harold Fannin really good too, by the way. So they have for as much as we've talked about needing weapons, it seems like they certainly have two in Quinshawn and Harold Fannin. Okay, we're gonna wrap up the podcast there, the Hey Mary Kay edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Questions from our football insider subscribers, cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. Get on our YouTube channel, it's Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. If you're not subscribed to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen, please get subscribed. Please leave us 5-star reviews. We love to see those. And I think that's everything I need to tell you about. Mary Kay, I'll talk to you later.
Sounds great.